Hey up everyone, welcome to the Rugby League History channel. Tonight's video is going to be rivalries in the National Rugby League, and I'm going to be doing a bit of a reaction video to a particular Rugby League personality out there in the community that they make these National Rugby League rivalry lists every 2 to 3 months, and I think they do it on purpose in a way to be divisive, to get likes, to get clicks. And some of what they put is just plain wrong. So I'm going to be doing a reaction video to that. Before I get into that though, if you have not yet subscribed, please consider subscribing to the channel. I'm up to 359 subscribers at the moment. My goal was to get the 350 by the end of November. I achieved that. I think it's a massive achievement to get to 359 subscribers at the moment, considering that I don't have any major connections. I'm not really affiliated with any of the bigger rugby league YouTubers out there. You can see I don't get paid to do this. I don't pay people to follow me, and I do all my videos on a cheap old iPhone, so I don't even have a computer to do proper videos on. So I think it's a massive achievement. Now, getting back to this video, as I said, every 2 or 3 months this particular rugby league personality out there does these National Rugby League rivalry videos and posts, and sometimes I read them and I just go, oh, fuck's sake, man, like, why are they fucking posting this stuff? So they did a post the other day where they had all 16 clubs, and then they had their opinion on who was the biggest rivals of each club. Now I'm going to do a reaction to every team that they listed. So the first team that they put Brisbane, and they said that their major rival was North Queensland, and the secondary rival was the Gold Coast. Well, I will agree with them on the first one. Brisbane, North Queensland, there's no doubt that that's a massive rivalry. Has been for a very long time. The Gold Coast though, I know a lot of Brisbane fans out there, and none of them consider the Gold Coast to be a rivalry. If there is going to be a rivalry between the Gold Coast and Brisbane, especially between the fans, it's going to be the other way around. It's going to be the Gold Coast that view Brisbane as the big brother, as the rival, because I can tell you that Brisbane and the Gold Coast from a Brisbane standpoint isn't really a rivalry. We go to the second club. They put Canberra, and they said Canberra's biggest rival was Melbourne and Eastern Suburbs. What the fuck? I don't know what to say to that. Look, the thing with the one-town teams, as I'll mention in the list here, one-town teams, they're not like the Sydney clubs where they have close neighbours. They're on their own. And the only way that the one-town teams can actually get a big match or sort of a big rivalry going, you could see, or as I put it, a competitive rivalry, is that they have to be competing for the Premiership, and another club that they run into has to be competing for the Premiership as well, and they get into a few decent matches that way. So Canberra on their own, they don't have a rivalry with anyone. It's only competitive rivalries that they've had throughout their history that have sort of been, you could see, classed as a rivalry. So Canberra's, you could see, first proper competitive rivalry was against Penrith. They met in the 89 and 1990 and 1991 grand finals. Then in the mid-90s they had a bit of a competitive thing going with Canterbury. They met in a few finals matches. They met in the 94 grand final, 95 preliminary final. And then for the last 20 years or so, because Canberra hasn't really been competing for the Premiership, yes, they have made the finals, but they haven't been right up there. It's only been recently that they've run into the likes of Melbourne and Eastern Suburbs. But would I say that if all these clubs were down the bottom of the ladder, would any of these clubs have anything in common besides going for the Premiership? I think not. So that's the first one debunked. Canberra don't really have a rival. Now we go to the next one, Canterbury. They've put South Sydney as the main rival, and then they've put Parramatta as the secondary rival. Well, I can tell you that Canterbury's biggest rival is Parramatta, and will always be Parramatta. It's been that way for, you could see, 40 or 50 years. Some people go, oh, it started in the 1980s. I'm telling you, it started way before then. Now they put South as the main rival. I don't know why the fuck they've done that. And they also mentioned that, oh, you know, it's a traditional Good Friday game. That's it's been going on for a very long time now, and I'm thinking the traditional Good Friday game only started in 2012. If you look at the history of Canterbury and South have only played each other in 2 grand finals, 1967, 2014, both won by South. And besides that, there was a bottle throwing incident in 2015 where a few fans threw bottles at the referee, and James Graham and David Clemmer surrounded the referee as well. So I don't know where they're going with this rivalry. It's not a rivalry to me. I don't consider Canterbury and South to be a rivalry whatsoever. Now we go on to the next club, Cronulla. They've listed St George and Manly as the 2 rivals, and you know, I'd have to agree with that, so that one's a pass. Now for the Gold Coast, they've listed Brisbane and North Queensland as the biggest rivals. Well, as I mentioned earlier, between the Gold Coast and Brisbane, if there was going to be some view of the rivalry, it's only going to be one way. And because, as I said, I know lots of Brisbane fans and none of them consider Gold Coast to be, they don't even really consider it to be an important match, to be fair. And with North Queensland, I know a few North Queensland fans as well, and none of them have got anything against the Gold Coast, and I don't consider that a rivalry to be, I don't consider that to be a rivalry either. Now we go on to the next club, which is Manly. They've listed Melbourne as the main rival and Parramatta as the secondary rival. I'd have to say that's wrong. I'd see that Manly's biggest rival historically and currently would have to be Parramatta if you're going to consider clubs that are still in the National Rugby League. If North Sydney was still in the National Rugby League today, I would definitely put Manly and North Sydney as Manly's biggest rival. Without question, Manly and North Sydney is a very bitter rivalry, I should know. And I'd see that their secondary rival is Parramatta. This goes all the way back to, you can see, the early days, even before the 1976 Grand Final when it really kicked off. I'd see that in the last 10 to 15 years, the rivalry between Manly and Parramatta has been diluted a bit by the fact with all the players swapping and some behind the scenes swapping with assistant coaches and all that keeper. But I'd see that there's definitely potential in the future that Manly and Parramatta match the embers could be refired again, and there could be a really big rivalry. But I've said in me Manly v Parramatta rivalry video that at the moment it's more of a dormant rivalry. The 2 clubs haven't played in a finals match since 2005, and there's plenty of potential there, but at the moment I'd say it's a dormant rivalry. Now we go to the next club, my favourite club in the world, Melbourne, and he's listed Canberra and Manly as their main rivals. Well, I have to disagree with that. As I said with Canberra, Melbourne are a one-town team. They don't have any close geographical rival. The only way that they have got rivals in the past is through competing with the Premiership with other clubs. And once that competition for the Premiership with that said club ends, that's the end of, you could see, the rivalry. So when Melbourne first came into the competition, they had the thing going with St George, 99-2000. Once St George kind of dropped off, that was it between Melbourne and St George. Then you can see the second big competitive rivalry they had was with Brisbane, 2004 to 2009. They met in a lot of finals matches there. And then they also had a competitive rivalry with Manly, 2007 to 2012. And then once those 2 clubs kind of dropped off, then it was Cronulla's turn between 2016 2018. Some very heated matches there. Then you can see in the last 2 or 3 years it's been Eastern Suburbs and Canberra. But I guarantee you, if Canberra drop off, if Eastern Suburbs drop off, who knows? If I'm just having a bit of a laugh here, but if West Tigers were up there for a couple of years playing against Melbourne, then this particular Rugby League personality would probably see the West Tigers as Melbourne's biggest rival. Now we go on to the next club he listed, which is North Queensland, and he's put Brisbane as their biggest rival. I'd have to agree with that. There's no question there. Now we go on to Parramatta and Parramatta. He's listed Penrith as the major rival and Canterbury as the second rival. Well, I can tell you, as a lifelong Parramatta fan, in members, I'm a member of many groups. I can tell you, Parramatta's biggest rival, without question, is Canterbury. And Penrith, I wouldn't even consider Penrith and Parramatta to be a rivalry. There's a big distance between the clubs. If you've actually lived in Sydney, there's about a 40-minute drive between the two. Penrith are kind of on their own there. They're not really surrounded by any other close team. The history with Parramatta, they haven't really played each other in any big games. I'd say the biggest match that Parramatta and Penrith have played against each other was the 2000 elimination final. And besides that, you had the 1985 semi-final they played against Parramatta. So Penrith and Parramatta don't really have much of a bit of history between each other. When I was growing up, nobody in my family, because I come from a family of all Parramatta fans, none of them ever said, oh, Penrith's a team that we hate and we must beat them. It was always either Canterbury or Manly, were the two clubs that were always brought up every year that we had to beat, Canterbury and Manly. And I definitely see Canterbury and Manly are Parramatta's two biggest rivals. Now the next club he named was Penrith. As I just mentioned, Parramatta Penrith, not a rivalry. And he's also mentioned West Tigers. I don't know why that is. Mainly, I think, because of Ivan Cleary, but that's more of a problem with Ivan Cleary and West Tigers. That's not a problem between the two clubs. So I'd say Penrith is one of those clubs that they don't really have a rival. It's just, you can see whoever they're competing with the Premiership up the top, if they are year in, year out, that would be a rival. But I'd say that's debunked. Parramatta and West Tigers are not rivals of Penrith. The next club, St George, they've named Cronulla as one of the rivals. I agree with that. And they've also named Eastern Suburbs. I agree with that as well. I think Eastern Suburbs and St George go a long way back, and I'm talking a very long way, going all the way back to 1935 when Eastern Suburbs had that really massive score over St George. I think it was 87 points to 5. And then a few years later, St George got the revenge, winning their first Premiership over Eastern Suburbs, and it's pretty much gone on from there. And then you've got the Anzac Day game as well. But I'd also include for the St George rivalry, I'd throw in Canterbury. Canterbury and St George go a long way back, a long way back. They're playing in some big games. And I'd also put in South as well. South Sydney, as we know, they're a foundation club. St George, they've also been around for a very long time. They played each other in a lot of grand finals, a lot of finals matches. And if you didn't know that, when South Sydney were kicked out of the competition in 1999, St George wrote a letter to the NRL saying that if South Sydney were readmitted to the competition, that would be detrimental to the competition and let them back in. So plenty of bad blood there, like. Now we go on to the next club he's named. He's got Eastern Suburbs as the main rival. I'm not going to argue with that. But he's also thrown in Canterbury. And as I've mentioned before, when I talked about the Good Friday game and all this other keeper, South Sydney and Canterbury is not really a rivalry. If I was to throw in a historical rivalry, though, if I was to throw in a club that had really bad blood with South and it was a rivalry, was Belmean. Belmean and South go a very long way back. Lots of big matches there, lots of bitter feuds, lots of bitterness between the two clubs. And you could also throw in Western Suburbs there for a time. In certain time periods, Western Suburbs and South Sydney had some very big games against each other. There was a bit of bad blood there as well, especially after the 1952 grand final. But we go on to the next club, which is Eastern Suburbs. They've put South Sydney as the main rival. I won't question that. And they've also put Melbourne as a secondary rival. As I mentioned earlier, Melbourne and Eastern Suburbs is not a rivalry. If I was to give Eastern Suburbs a second rivalry, I'd probably throw in there Canterbury. Canterbury and Eastern Suburbs is a big game on the calendar every year. There's a lot of bitterness between the two clubs, and they go way back, as I mentioned. Now we go on to the next club, Newcastle. They've named Manly and Eastern Suburbs as the rivals. I don't really know what to say to that. all I can see is what the fuck, basically. Newcastle, like I said, with Canberra, Melbourne, they don't have a rival. They don't have anyone that's geographically close to them. It's just a matter of who is competing for the Premiership at the time. With Manly, I wouldn't really see that was ever a rivalry. Even when they played each other in the finals and the grand final, I'd see that was more of a thing between Mark Carroll and Paul Harrigan. And then you also had people like John Opawati in there that they'd fight anyone. So I was there at the time, and I wouldn't really consider Manly and Newcastle to be a rivalry. Eastern Suburbs, I don't know why he's put that. I would say if Newcastle were to have a rivalry, just seeing an alternate dimension, I'd probably put the Central Coast Bears. If North Sydney's moved to the Central Coast eventuated, or if they got readmitted later, I'd definitely see Central Coast and Newcastle would be a rivalry. I'd see that would be a big game, and I'd see Newcastle and the Central Coast would not like each other. We go on to the next club, which is New Zealand. He's named Melbourne and the Gold Coast. Once again, what the fuck? Don't really know how much to say to that. With Melbourne, I'd see Melbourne is more of a. You can see New Zealand and Melbourne. New Zealand's more of a bogey side for Melbourne. I wouldn't see that it's a rivalry whatsoever. And with the Gold Coast, maybe they just run out of ideas and they decided to put the Gold Coast there. Like I said, with Newcastle and Central Coast, I'd see an alternate dimension. If the Wellington bid got in 2006 and not the Gold Coast, I definitely see that New Zealand and Wellington would be a massive rivalry. You'd have the North Island versus the South Island. That would have been a massive game. And lastly, we've got West Tigers. He's put Penrith and Parramatta. As I said earlier, the Penrith West Tigers thing, that's more of an Ivan Cleary thing, that he's had a problem with the West Tigers. And for Parramatta, I'm a Parramatta fan. I got knout against West Tigers. I know a lot of Parramatta fans that have got knout against the West Tigers. I think probably in the last couple of years, there was the thing where West Tigers have had to play a couple of games at Bank West, and they've put the hashtag Our Jungle thingy there. But besides that, I've got no bother with them whatsoever. If I was to actually go for some club that West Tigers fans don't particularly like, and I know a lot of West Tigers fans, would be South Sydney. I used to drink at a lot of pubs in the inner west of Sydney when I lived in Australia. I knew a lot of West Tigers fans, and a lot of them did not like South Sydney one bit. And I think that comes from the old Belmean days as well. I think a lot of the older generation, they've taken that Belmean South rivalry, and when it's become West Tigers, they've continued that hatred for South. I'd also see that historically as well, Western Suburbs and Belmean, they had a thing against St George. I mean, St George, they played against Western Suburbs in 3 grand finals in the 1960s in a row. They also played against, in that 11-year stretch, they played against Belmean 3 times. So, and especially in the 1940s as well, there's some big games between Belmean and St George. So historically, I'd see the Western Suburbs and Belmean, they have a thing against St George. But the thing with West Tigers is that they're, you got the base at Leichhardt, you got the base at Campbelltown. Now, Leichhardt's close to a couple of different clubs, but Campbelltown's kind of out there on its own. So I'd have to say that both those I disagree with. I don't think that Penrith and Parramatta are rivals of West Tigers. Before I go, I thought I'd also like to mention that this particular personality was saying stuff like, oh, they haven't played each other in a finals match in a long time and the crowds are down, so therefore it's not really a rivalry anymore. And all I have to say to that is, just because the crowds are down, just because they haven't played each other in a finals match in a while, it doesn't make it any less of a rivalry, especially clubs like Parramatta and Canterbury. I can guarantee you the hatred still runs deep. The hatred still runs deep between those two clubs. And another thing that they forgot to mention was the cost of living as well. Especially in Sydney, the cost of living is astronomical. And if you're following a club that's down towards the bottom of the ladder and they're not playing well and they're not putting in the effort, why would you as a fan, because to go to the Rugby League in Sydney, it costs at least 100 quid minimum to go. So if your club's down the bottom, why would you spend 100, 200 quid to go watch a club that are not playing well, they're not putting in the effort, and you're not really getting any enjoyment or retain out of that investment that you're putting in the club? So I can understand fans of, at the moment, Canterbury, St George, clubs like that wanting this, not going in the matches, because why would you? I mean, you're always going to have those rusted on fans. You're going to have those 10 to 20,000 fans that will show up no matter what. But there are a lot of people out there that will sit back and go, this club's not doing it for me at the moment. They're not putting in the effort. They're not playing well. Why should I spend my hard-earned money to go and watch them play? And especially in Sydney, I mean, the cost of living there is just fucking outrageous, like. And I can tell you that firsthand. But anyways, everyone, I was getting a bit sidetracked there at the end. That's my video on the National Rugby League and the rivalries. I have also done individual videos of these rivalries in the past. So if you want to go check those out, you can. But that's my video. I hope you enjoyed it. It's gone for a bit longer than what I thought it would be. But I hope you enjoyed it. If you haven't yet subscribed to the channel, make sure that you do so. And also go out and check out my pages on Facebook and Instagram. I post there daily. Anyways, everyone, I'm going to get out of here, and I hope that you enjoy your Tuesday tomorrow, wherever you be in the world. Alright, catch us all later. Tatty bye.